As American cities collapse in the turmoil of the 1970s, Philadelphians hope against hope. Amidst the chaos, leaders build grand projects and promise renewal.
All of us working together.
But on the streets, an undertow of violence, fear, and division threatens the spirit of the city.
They're going to be taken by force if they resist, children or not.
Do you know who fired the first shot?
With blood on the streets, who will heal Philadelphia?
Philadelphia really came out of very, very tough times, times when everybody was really tested, but cities are fluid and dynamic, and they're ever-changing.
Philadelphia underwent enormous transformation, and so the city became harder.
There had been gang warfare in the city. Kids felt immobilized. They couldn't cross the street. Some of the kids were writing on walls because they wanted a sense of reputation.
My name is Pizzazz. I'm 17 years old, and I'm a graffiti artist.
Graffiti would soon cover the entire globe. But first, it seems to cover all of Philadelphia. The scrawling seen both as a scourge and as a symbol of youthful energy.
It's just like an adventure you go on. You come home and you feel like you accomplished something.
This is what I did night and day. Graffiti writing to me was escaping the pressures of the ghetto life. It was about getting your name as many places as you possibly can. My name was spray painted maybe 100,000 places. I am the first modern-day graffiti artist.
It's not vandalism for its own sake. It's not purely anarchistic, for example. It contains within it a kernel of protest.
What do you think they may be trying to say?
I don't know what they're trying to say.
When you look at it first, you don't like it.
This is disgusting everywhere you go. Lock them all up. Lock them up.
But underneath it, it's sheltering a rebirth of the community.
In a lot of the rundown neighborhood, there's no color. All you see is brokenness.
But when you take something that's already destroyed, there's not much more you can do to it.
In graffiti, there's messages, there are images, and then there are color. There's a rawness and energy there. I see it as destructive, but I also see it something alive.
As invisible authors claim the city walls as their own, the same spirit drives a new generation of leaders who stand up to challenge the status quo.
I was born in Alabama. I came to Philadelphia right after graduation. I knew I had made a mistake. From the second I put my second foot down, I knew I had made a mistake.
Philadelphia is like an enigma to many African Americans. We at least knew what was going on in the South. We saw the signs, but this is as much a segregated city as I just left.
Philadelphia's African American population had always been among the largest in the nation. But as activists win landmark victories for civil rights, the now dominant Democratic Party manipulates and controls Black elected officials.
The Black community did start to think of representing themselves rather than finding somebody who would treat them fairly. Do we need to find a good white boy, or do we need to represent ourselves?
Tom McIntosh, who was the city councilman from North Philadelphia. I saw him on the street one day, and it was like, Mr. McIntosh, why haven't you done more? And he said, you young guys just don't really understand. While we may not be able to get too many things accomplished, what we really do is keep some things from happening.
My father was very concerned about the absence of a voice. The growing needs within the African American community, my dad quietly felt like they really weren't being addressed.
The Black Political Forum, organized by John White Sr., registers new voters and helps elect representatives to City Council, the state legislature, and Congress. But despite their efforts, the mayor's office remains out of reach. In 1979, the winner is Reform candidate Bill Green, son of the former Democratic leader.
The people of this city want change, they want new direction, they want new leadership, they want a new spirit and a new momentum as we begin a new decade.
Green appoints W. Wilson Goode, a founding member of the Black Political Forum, to be his managing director.
Wilson Goode took the managing director's office out of City Hall and took it out into the neighborhoods, and people loved him for it.
Wilson Goode had never run for office before, but he'd staked out a reputation as an efficient problem solver. Somebody who got things done, who went to neighborhoods and got trash picked up, got police presence there when they needed it.
In 1983, more than a century since blacks were granted the vote in Philadelphia, Goode decides to mount his own campaign for mayor.
Wilson Goode is working for Philadelphia's future.
But first, he must face off against the ever-present Frank Rizzo. Only 4 years out of office, the former mayor plans his return to power.
They're beginning to know what Wilson Goode represents. He's a big zero.
But with a business-like campaign, Goode wins the nomination and the election. He is the city's first African-American mayor.
It means a tremendous amount for the city. You now have someone who empathizes with the experiences of African Americans and doesn't necessarily see that community as a space for confrontation.
Wilson Goode's election in 1983 was a key moment. It was an historic moment. It was the city shedding the skin of Frank Rizzo. Philadelphia, in a sense, has always been a progressive place, but this really proves that we can be both progressive and, frankly, humane.
Wasting no time, Mayor Goode selects a 25-year-old community activist from West Philadelphia to head the city's new anti-graffiti network. Tim Spencer has one job: clean up the walls.
Tim Spencer looked at a wall with graffiti and said, this can be more than a wall with graffiti. We can get rid of it. We can turn these young people around.
In the mid-'80s, graffiti in Philadelphia was nothing short of a social epidemic. Tim Spencer wanted to help kids who had fallen through the cracks. Tim's strength was his ability to connect.
The very first thing I did was to bring all of the wall riders into City Hall and have them turn in their writing utensils and their spray cans.
Me and Tim Spencer worked closely together with the Anti-Graffiti Network, and we cleaned the city up. He gave me the job, and a lot of graffiti artists who was doing it just complied and fell in.
The fact that Cornbread was a field representative was really interesting, and it showed me that Wilson Goode was thinking out of the box. I mean, you're gonna hire graffiti writers?
When you remove graffiti, what do you put in its place? When much of the graffiti was removed from the city, the mural arts program just grew out of that naturally.
In an unusual step for city government, Mayor Goode adds an art department to the Anti-Graffiti Network. Jane Golden, a young painter from California, will lead the new mural arts program.
When mural art started, Jane Golden was able to channel all this kind of anti-established energy.
This is a program where the seat of power is open to kids from all over the city. When we started to do the work, and I saw how they responded to painting murals, I realized that we could take this a step further, that they would really become immersed in working with the community.
Communities begin to think of murals as an ambition. And I think that's a very empowering experience.
Philadelphia used to be the graffiti capital of the world. Today is the mural capital of the world.
As muralists paint on neighborhood walls, construction workers dig in the bedrock deep below Center City. In 1978, Mayor Frank Rizzo had secured federal funding for a grand plan to revitalize downtown, a 2-mile tunnel to connect the Reading and Pennsylvania railroad lines into a single, unified, regional rail system.
You would be hard-pressed in the 20th century to find a more significant physical accomplishment.
Here comes the best thing that Frank Rizzo ever did for the city of Philadelphia. You would not have the commuter tunnel without Frank Rizzo. President Nixon gave the city $310 million.
The flight of residents to outlying areas needs to be countered in some way by making the downtown more attractive and more useful and more exciting. So the city invests in some phenomenally important projects.
The commuter rail tunnel was the first national big dig. They had literally propped up on stilts the whole Reading market in order to run this tunnel through. And it wasn't just one block. This was affecting probably 20 or 30 blocks through the city. It gave a sense of something happening. It got people excited about the city instead of cynical about the city.
In 1984, the opening of the Center City commuter connection sparks new interest in downtown, especially among developers who seize the moment as the old establishment fades away.
Philadelphia was controlled by the bank presidents. It was the strongest Philadelphia institution. Finally, all of the major banks began to merge. And this left a power vacuum in the city. And the power vacuum went to developers.
But developers will have to confront a lasting vestige of old Philadelphia, the unwritten rule that no building should rise taller than William Penn's statue atop City Hall.
When Ed Bacon ruled like a czar over development in Philadelphia, he liked to say that when developers would come in anticipating skyscrapers around City Hall, he would look them in the eye and say to them, "You understand the rule that no building can be higher than City Hall in Philadelphia is not legal. It's what we call a gentleman's agreement. Now my question is, are you a gentleman?"
City Hall was the tallest structure of its kind when it was first built. The gentleman's agreement reflected a sort of reverence for the 19th century city.
That gentleman's agreement for Billy Penn's hat was the stupidest, most ridiculous, most parochial thing of any city in the country. Every city needs a skyline. You know, when you drive to a city, that's the first thing you look at.
I think that it's incumbent upon the development community to be forced to sit in a room and solve the problem.
In April of 1984, Willard Rouse, a brash, charismatic developer, enrages traditionalists with his plan for a soaring skyscraper called Liberty Place, rising 400 feet higher than William Penn's hat.
When Bill Rouse came to me and said, "I want to build a building taller than the hat on William Penn," and we talked about it being a gentleman's agreement, and I said to him, "We're two gentlemen, let's make a deal to do it."
The Planning Commission staff was in favor of letting developer Willard Rouse build at 17th and Market, which would tower over Penn's statue.
There is more space for the pedestrian. There is more space to shop. There is more respect being paid to human beings. And that I think ultimately the project will succeed for that reason.
We feel that this proposal has very substantial merit.
To the assembled crowd, the groundbreaking for Liberty Place marks a new beginning and a triumph for the popular mayor. But on the same day, just 5 miles from the celebration, an unfolding tragedy seems to shatter the hopes of the city. On the 6200 block of Osage Avenue, a back-to-nature group turns their home into a fortress. They call themselves MOVE. Armed with a bullhorn and a stockpile of firearms, MOVE rails against Philadelphia as an unjust and brutal place.
The residents of Osage Avenue, they don't want to hear this nonsense about what the system is doing and how it's wrong.
Following a 1978 shootout, the imprisonment of 9 of their members intensifies the group's resolve, and soon, relations with neighbors disintegrate.
They were living in abject squalor. They were living in conditions that were clearly unfit for human habitation.
Trash, and the animals were back there. In the summertime, they had raw meat back there.
MOVE decided that the way to get publicity for getting their 9 members out of jail was to start making a lot of noise. And they made a lot of noise.
If people can't hear you, you speak louder. As the violence and attacks against MOVE escalated, so did our volume escalate.
By 1985, the people inside the MOVE house on Osage Avenue themselves had a sense of persecution, that they were under siege from the Philadelphia Police Department.
That police department had a long history of anger and hostility and confrontations with the black community. There are pressures on a black mayor frequently to try to gain control of a police department.
I don't know how to solve a problem at this point. I cannot, as mayor of the city, take an illegal action in order to begin to deal with the concerns of a block.
My initial view was that there was nothing that I could do about it because I had a right to live unless they broke the law in some way.
The city, the media, maybe the populace itself just could not process MOVE. This hands-off policy permitted the problem to escalate and grow worse and worse.
When MOVE members construct a bunker on the roof of their house, police evacuate the surrounding blocks and prepare for battle.
Their aim was not to drive people out of our home. Their aim was to kill.
I had tried to talk to the MOVE people. I said, folks, you have children in this house, things are gonna be terrible. And one of the MOVE members said, tell them to come on with it.
There is a world of difference between violence and self-defense. Did MOVE go to somebody's home, or did they come out to our home?
The fire department bombards the house with water. Then police shoot more than 10,000 rounds of ammunition, but MOVE returns fire. The bunker remains.
I thought that in a minute, the folks would walk out and put their hands up and surrender. I did not think that it would go beyond that.
What do you think?
Believe it or not, I think you'll have to kill all of them.
The standoff continues, with Good watching on television. On the scene, Police Commissioner Gregor Sambor and Managing Director Leo Brooks approve a plan to dislodge the bunker. They will drop a satchel containing C4 explosives onto the roof of the MOVE house. At 5:27 p.m., a police helicopter closes in.
The fire department wanted to put out the ensuing fire, and Sambor wouldn't let the fire department do its job. It's the most horrifying thing I ever saw in my life.
There's no way that a fire commissioner should abdicate to a police commissioner. If he had simply put out the fire, and if they hadn't decided to let it burn, all those lives wouldn't have been lost.
Only 2 residents escape the MOVE house. 11 others, including 5 children, die in the fire. The blaze rages on into the night, consuming and destroying 3 city blocks. More than 60 homes.
Although I feel that I did all that I could do, when you're a mayor and when things happen on your watch, you're responsible. And so I'm responsible.
To sacrifice us to cover up their mess was not fair. I didn't do anything to these people. I didn't do anything. All I wanted was help.
We talk about the 11 lives, and particularly the 5 children that were killed on that day, but there were other people that lost their lives in this, and they've just remained nameless. The fact that no one has been brought to account for that is going to be a festering sore forever.
When you have the confrontation at the move house, the inability of the city to manage is ripped open, is exposed for all to see.
This was the worst horror story of any city in the country. You had a tremendous crime wave problem. You had a homeless problem. You had a drug problem.
All these forces congeal to form this very noxious brew of racism, paranoia, fear, that was ultimately destructive to the entire city.
In 30 years, Philadelphia has lost more than 400,000 residents. The crack epidemic and a national recession drive the murder rate to record levels. In South Philly, a mafia war rages.
Reputed Philadelphia crime boss Philip Testa tripped a bomb that took his life. He met the same kind of violent end as did many of his associates.
Later, in 1991, the city confronts a financial crisis that shocks even the experts. A deficit of more than $260 million. The city's cash dries up. Now William Penn's promise that a city could be both tolerant and wealthy seems to lie in ruin.
You begin to see the Bostons in New York change. They understood that the old manufacturing ways would not work, and Philadelphia, I don't think, ever really caught on to that.
Jobs were fleeing the city at a record pace. We were losing our manufacturing base. Nobody wanted to stay in Philadelphia. People who could move were moving, and businesses who could move were moving. We were on the verge of becoming Detroit without the automobiles.
I stand here today as mayor of what could be the greatest city in America. I cannot and will not falter.
New Mayor Ed Rendell works with city and state officials to successfully balance the budget by 1994. But jobs and population continue to slip away. After 300 years of invention, collapse, triumph, and crisis, shock waves of history continue to shape the conflicted character of Philadelphia.
When you're caught in an undertow, you don't fight it, you swim across it. And you try to make progress in some direction. City life is like that. You can't stop any of its momentum toward creativity, toward disaster. And so you swim with the tide.
The city needs to acknowledge tension and violence that's been a part of its very, very long history. The city needs to try to fulfill the promise of what Philadelphia could truly be. It has brought people from across the world to find a new life.
I came from Taiwan in 1963. I was looking for space. And I was looking to find who I was. And I started working in Philadelphia. It is forgotten, it's forsaken, it's bleak, but it contains the seed ready for transformation. And that is a space of freedom. You can think, you can experiment, you can make a mistake. How did they manage in all the economic hard times, down times, but with love? In the city, of brotherly and sisterly love of Philadelphia.